The biggest issue for me in politics is actually not politics, it's culture. Cultural issues are going to have a bigger impact on politics down the road. And so when I look at how the Democratic Party is acting in terms of identity politics, it worries me. I don't like the idea that you will look at someone and make a determination about them based on their race or gender or all these things. And that's what we see with Harvard, for instance. That's why the Democrats piss me off. And we can see this story here from Politico. 2020 Democrats are dramatically changing the way they talk about race. They're shrugging off fears of driving more white voters to Donald Trump. And what this should say is that Democrats are dramatically engaging in identity politics. Democrats are embracing overt racism, etc., etc. One of the biggest problems I have is how they pretend to be opposed to racism while embracing policies that are overtly racist, right? So I want to clarify too, not everything that they say is wrong. Not everything they say when they talk about identity and race issues is wrong. What I primarily take issue with is saying that based on your race, you can or cannot do so. You personally can't do something, right? So what I mean is, for Harvard to say Asians have to score higher. Yeah, that's not cool because you can't just assume Asians are smarter than everybody and Asians aren't a monolith. Just because some people look like some other people doesn't mean that you can just know who they are as a person. And that's true for, race, gender, etc. Or for gender as well as national origin and things of that nature. Obviously, there are some things we can assume, like, look, I'm part Asian. You could naturally assume that at some point in my life, I've probably had, like a traditional family recipe of some kind of Asian food, right? That's a fair assumption in my opinion. Is it possible? Yeah, maybe, but I'm only, it's not like, the point I'm trying to make is that for the most part, you can't make assumptions about people based on what they look like. And that's what I'm concerned about. But let's read the story. Democrats thinking about running for president in 2020 are dramatically changing the way the party talks about race in Donald Trump's America. Get ready to hear a lot more about intersectionality, allyship, inclusivity, and POC. White and non-white Democratic hopefuls are talking more explicitly about race than the party's White House aspirants ever have, and shrugging off warnings that embracing so-called identity politics could distract from the party's economic message and push white voters further into Donald Trump's arms. And it will also push some non-white people into Donald Trump's arms because, I assure you, people don't like to be reduced to their race, plain and simple. And even if it's positive or negative discrimination, there's going to be a lot of people saying like, yo, that's not cool, right? While the 2020 primary will feature debates about Medicare for all and college affordability, the Democratic base also wants to know how candidates will address systemic racism and what they think it means to be an ally to people of color. The shift is largely a response to Trump, his words and actions on issues infused with race, from NFL players protesting, no. They're injecting race in this, right? Donald Trump insulted some journalists who happened to be black, and they said Donald Trump is insulting black journalists. It's like, yeah, okay, come on. He's insulting a ton of journalists. The number one journalist he insults is Jim Acosta, right? So, but they make it a race issue. The media does this. The left does this, right? Right now in Mexico, Mexicans are protesting the migrant caravan, calling it an invasion. But Donald Trump is racist when he does it because they say it's all about racism. And I actually have friends who say, oh, it's just because they don't like brown people. And I'm like, are you going to tell the brown people in Mexico they don't like brown people? Like, yes, they do. They do. They call it internalized racism. It's insane that this exists. This is some kind of weird, warped ideology. And it's getting crazy. And if the Democrats keep embracing this, count me out. I ain't going to vote for you. And as I've stated time and time again, my policies on economics, okay, are on the left. But I will not, but the core issues for me, identity politics is paramount, okay? If you've got two people arguing whether or not to increase or decrease taxes for various reasons, I'll listen to the debate. If one of them says, but we're going to increase taxes on a particular race, I'd be like, whoa, you're done. You're out. I don't have anything to do with that. So when you have one side advocating for hardcore identity politics, right? You're pushing people like me away. Now, we'll read on with the story. I think people on the left are really looking for someone that can take on corporate power and eradicate systemic racism, said Karthik Ganapathy, who served as a spokesman for Bernie Sanders during his 2016 presidential run. So with mixed results, while Democrats such as Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kirsten Gillibrand are earnestly embracing the language of social justice, racial justice advocates, and potential candidates like Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Julian Castro are leaning into race in a way that Barack Obama did not, and felt he could not throughout his first campaign and much of his presidency. Let's just start with the hard truth about our criminal justice system. It's racist, Warren said this past summer. In another speech, Warren dismissed the pundits who argued that Democrats have to choose between being the party of the white working class and the party of Black Lives Matter. No, they don't. Man, I firmly believe that for the most part, it is not the white working class trying to drum up racial divisions. Seriously, like, you're not going to blame the poor white people for being racist. Why would the Democrats have to choose between the two? And I'm going to say this, listen. If this is your plan going into 2020, you are basically saying you want to lose. Donald Trump should not have carried some of the Rust Belt states that he did. He won by slim margins. But it's because the Democrats keep doing this. Right now in this country, white people are about 63% of the population. You then have some mixed race people, and then you have minorities who also don't like this kind of talk. If you're going, and look, not all white people don't like, there are a lot of white progressives who love this. In fact, most progressives are white, but they're a tiny fraction of the country. If you start targeting white people saying, Democrats, you can either be for the white working class or Black Lives Matter. Well, Black Lives Matter is ridiculously small compared to the white working class. And none of that, let's talk about numbers. The U.S. is 13% black. The U.S. is 63% white. What they're saying right now is they want to use race as a key issue in their politics. What they're saying is they'd rather sacrifice the largest voting bloc. And don't get me wrong. You should not base your policy off of what race you're trying to serve. You should do everyone, regardless of race. Why choose between the two when you can say, I'll be there for both groups? I will be there for the working class of any race. I will be there for activist groups who are concerned about racial inequities, and we will sit down and we'll try and figure out how we can solve these problems. Instead, it's extremely divisive. What are they going to do? You're going to push white people right away, and that's your biggest voting bloc. And then you're going to push rational, non-identitarian minorities away, and especially mixed race people, right? After coasting to re-election this month in New York, Gillibrand declared in her victory speech that it all started with the Women's March, an intersectional moment when you could march with your sign regardless of what it said. Women's reproductive rights, Black Lives Matter, clean air, clean water, LGBTQ equality, and I bet that's going to bite her in the ass as now Alyssa Milano, Deborah Messing, and many others on the left are calling out the Women's March for being anti-Semites because some of the key organizers regularly attend Louis Farrakhan events and have praised him and refused to denounce him. Alyssa Milano said she won't speak at the Women's March until Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory, I believe her name is, are out because they're anti-Semites. Gillibrand, in her attempt to pander to the freaky weirdos, these racist, hardcore racists who want race to be everything, has just basically aligned herself with anti-Semitism. And that will come back to bite her. I assure you, in the next re-election, whoever's up against her is going to say something like, but didn't you support that anti-Semitic movement where its founders were praising Farrakhan and was called out by celebrities on the left? How will you defend that? This is what you do when you walk yourself into these weird groups, because I assure you, on the left, identitarians are very anti-Semitic. Not all of them, of course not. Many of them are. Many of them are. And that's why you see people like Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory praising Louis Farrakhan, who is a hardcore anti-Semite. Man, I say hardcore. If there was a crazier, a stronger word I could use, Louis Farrakhan is probably the worst of the worst. And that's what Gillibrand stands behind. The Women's March. Great. Well, they're abandoning, And this is one of the biggest problems with aligning yourself with one of these fringe factional groups, is because the Women's March has been called out time and time again for being anti-Semitic. Linda Sarsour praising, you could argue whether or not she's supporting or wants Sharia law, but she did advocate to an extent and praise it. And that's according to Snopes. You get people calling her out nonstop saying, hey, this is being led by anti-Semites, and everyone just ignores it because you can get away with it politically, and then Alyssa Milano, Deborah Messing, many others now calling them out for anti-Semitism. They had to issue a public statement about this, right? That's what Gillibrand just embraced. Congratulations on playing identity politics, Gillibrand. You're now an anti-Semite. In a letter to her supporters, Gillibrand again nodded to intersectionality, a framework that considers overlapping prejudices people face, writing that resistance is female, intersectional, and powered by our belief in one another. I think they're betting on, who are you going to get when you say white people are bad? First, let's look at it this way. Out of this entire country, 8% are considered progressive activists, and that's based on a study by Hidden Tribes using data from YouGov, considered relatively reliable. 8%. So and it's mostly white. That means we could estimate that if 8% of of the country is progressive and it's mostly white, how many white progressives are there? Okay, maybe 6%. That is a ridiculously tiny, tiny minority of the population. When you realize 63% of the country is white, why would you start deriding people based on their gender and race? If you start going after white males, you're saying around 30 odd percent, go away. We don't want you to vote for us. And that's, okay, they're going to go vote for conservatives. It's insane to me that this is the game they're playing. Let's be as divisive as possible and push away as many voters as possible. Why? Why not just be like, hey, we're going to be here for everybody? Let's read their closing statement, though, because they go on to talk about like better work and stuff like that. They say, this may only be the beginning. Survey and polling data suggests that the partisan divides on race and identity are only going to grow. Political scientists John Sides, Michael Tesler, and Lynn Vavrek write in their new book, Identity Crisis. These changes in the party coalitions incentivize politicians in both parties to run on identity politics, the trio argue. This is the American identity crisis, and it is getting worse. Count me out. Anyway, I got a couple more videos coming up in just a couple of minutes. The next video, that Chipotle incident where the dude claimed the Latina woman serving him, or who refused to serve him, was racist. It was a hoax. And apparently Chipotle is lying about it. Stick around, that video should be up in a few minutes, or in all likelihood, it's probably already on my channel. Check it out.